Hi everyone, Allison and I are going to tell you a little bit about the Peabody Developmental Motor Scales 2nd edition. So to start, we have the authors of the assessment here. It's a norm reference standardized test, and the full kit can be purchased on the publisher's site or Pearson's assessment for $599, but individual components can also be purchased. So this assessment was developed specifically because at the time, no other measure of motor development was available. This test is meant for 0 to 5-year-olds. They can be tested in a variety of settings, and it's meant to assess and train or remediate both gross and fine motor skills. The movements that the test covers are super important skills both for the child to carry out occupations and to assist development later in life. So not just OTs use this assessment, but really anyone who's looking to assess motor abilities of young kids. There's a guide to item administration that helps you work through the examiner record booklet as you administer the test. Items can be administered up to 3 times for the child to do their best, and parents can observe but may not intervene just to make sure the test is reliable. The full test takes about 45 to 60 minutes, but can be broken down into shorter sections if the child needs it. However, each scale needs to be completed within 5 days, again, for reliable scores. So these are the 6 subtests. Orange is gross motor skills and brown is fine motor skills. So here's what the record booklet looks like that you fill out while performing the assessment. You're going to establish a basal level. So the last 3 2s, which is the highest score in a row before you get a 1 or a 0, shows that they have these skills, and everything below down and don't need a retest. Then you keep going to more difficult skills until they get 3 0s, and then the assessment is done. As I said, each skill you can get 3 trials. This is just a look at the guide to item administration that you use to help you properly assess the child as you fill out the record booklet with descriptions and pictures. Now, this is the motor activities program. It has examples of a filled out record booklet, and then shows how you interpret the scores and how you can use it for designing and implementing interventions. It also covers adaptations you may need to use for kids, and lastly goes through all the subtests, giving reasoning for items, related skills, critical elements, and instruction strategies for guiding the kids. And here are a couple video examples of gross motor skills in the PDMS-2. Here's a stationary subtest. So a lot of the items are pretty quick like this, standing on 1 foot for 10 seconds. All right, and then we have the locomotion subtest. And the practitioner shows the skill first. And here's some fine motor test items. So here's a grasping subtest.
Button this as fast as you
can. So child didn't complete the task, score accordingly, and then we have the VMI subtest.
So draw a square, okay?
So there's a lot of items that come in the PDMS-2 kit. So we have the examiner's manual, the profile summary form, the examiner record booklet, the guide to item administration, the motor activities program, and the motor development chart. So here are some examples of manipulatives that are included with the kit. And some examples you saw in the videos were the black line master and the large button strip. Here are some examples of what items used in the assessment that are not included with the kit. So the PDMS just recommends that you use items that are as similar as possible to these. So now for the scoring. So first we have raw scores. These are recorded while the child's doing the assessment by the OT. The child earns a 2 if they perform the item according to the specified criteria. They earn a 1 if their performance shows a clear resemblance to the item mastery criteria but does not fully meet the criteria. And they earn a 0 if they cannot or will not attempt the item, or the attempt does not show that the skill is emerging. We later convert these to make a little more sense. So now for age equivalence, this is where we convert the child's raw scores into what the Peabody calls their motor age. So for example, a child who scores a 61 to 64 on the locomotion subtest is equivalent to about 11 months. And now for percentiles, just keep in mind this is specifically for 42 to 44 old. So let's say the child scores between a 110 and 120 on the locomotion portion. They would score in the 5th percentile, meaning that 95% of children their age scored better than them. You can find all these charts in the manual. Next, we have the standard scores, same chart as the last slide. Once again, if we did the 110 to 120, they're in the locomotion area, their standard score would be a 5. And then the manual also has an interpretation of these scores. So if we look at the 5, they have poor motor skills in the locomotion subsection. And then finally, for quotient scores, this is when we add those standard scores together of the subtests. So for example, the fine motor subtest, if we added the two subtests together and they were 15, the quotient would be 85. And then just a continuation of the quotient scores. As you can see on the last slide, it totaled up, the total motor quotient was 5 subtests, and we have 6 subtests. That's because for children less than a year old, you add up the subtests of reflexes, stationary, and locomotion standard scores. And then for children 1 to 5, you add the stationary, locomotion, and object manipulation standard scores. And then same for fine motor quotient, you add the grasping and visual motor integration standard scores. So why would OTs use the PDMS-2? They'd use it to estimate a child's motor abilities compared to their peers, to compare a child's gross versus fine motor skills. It allows us to see the child's progress over time. It allows us to study the nature of motor development and the role of motor abilities in academic achievement and the effectiveness of motor interventions. And then overall, children need to develop these motor skills to carry out occupations. Doing this assessment allows us to identify any early developmental issues and correct them in that critical time period between 0 and 5.